In order to become great in the eyes of God, you must first become little. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Small Like Paul. It's Ricky.
And it's Adrian.
And we're really excited to get into a new episode of Small Like Paul today.
There's no one sitting in between us.
As you can tell, we have a special guest, but I'll get to that in a second. If you guys are new to the channel, we want to just welcome you guys into Small Like Paul. This is a podcast that we've started and basically want to get the gospel message through the lens of Paul to as many people as possible in this modern sense. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you guys haven't already, make sure you guys like and subscribe this video. And if you're listening to it on a streaming platform, make sure you guys follow us there as well. Like as I said before, we do have a special guest with us today. Our brother, John Mark Kaldahl. He's a youth minister. He's also just a servant to the Lord and a brother in Christ to us, and a fellow Exodus brother, which, spoiler alert, that's what we're getting into today. What we wanted to talk about, we've mentioned it before on the podcast, is you and my testimonies of going through the Exodus 90 fast and how it led to us starting this podcast.
Yeah.
And John Mark is a big part of that. So
he is a big part. John Mark actually introduced Exodus to us. I kind of knew about Exodus before. I don't know if Ricky knew anything about it before, like 2 years ago when we first did it. But I kind of knew, and I was like, that's cool. Right. And then you actually said, hey, let's do this. And it was just really random.
You took the initiative.
We kind of want to know, I guess we could start this off. Obviously, you can tell us a little bit about
yourself. Yeah.
But then kind of also segue into, what prompted you to do Exodus, and why did you tell a bunch of random old Joes to do it?
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for having me on this. And my journey began, honestly, when I was much younger. My dad always did Exodus. I always heard about it. I saw my friends doing it, and I was like, 90 days without all this random stuff. I was like, I can't do that. And then it was actually 2 years ago when I met you guys. I went ahead and started dating my fiance at the time. At the time, my girlfriend. Now she's my fiance. That's not really
I noticed that. I was like, let's put that up real quick. She is his current fiance. We love you, Jackie. We love you.
But I basically, in that moment, my friends were all doing Exodus and stuff like that. My dad was doing it. I never saw a spark for me to kind of go ahead and go about that. It never happened. And then when I came on up here, I moved on up here. I've got a job on up here, being a youth minister in a different parish, far away from my family, far away from all my brothers in Christ, like all my sisters in Christ from Miami. And I just felt alone. I really did feel alone. Then meeting you guys, the thing was I knew, like, hey, the way to meet you guys, the way to hang out with you guys was trying to create that time to really be present with you guys. Really creating that brotherhood. And that's something in my heart I really longed for. And so my dad just encouraged me, hey, do Exodus, do this. And I was like, all right, I'll try. And I really got interested in it. I told my dad, like, hey, hand me the book, hand me all this stuff. And
so it was the pops.
We had that. Yeah, it was my dad. My dad really was like, hey, I think this is going to be really, really good for you to start on. And I was like, all right.
Now, who told him now?
We go deep down the rabbit trail.
We go deep down.
Well, let's explain for those of our viewers that might not even know what this fast is and what it entails. Let's kind of explain that a little bit. So this is called the Exodus 90 fast.
90 fast.
Right. So it's basically, the idea is it's based around the book of Exodus.
It's based around the book of Exodus, and it stems off of fraternity, as you guys know. Asceticism, being able to separate yourself and having disciplines. Detachment and prayer is really what it really entails. Yeah. Doing that for 90 days, which is something, the reason why they say 90 days is because it takes about 3 months really to either break a bad habit or encourage a new habit. Set a new one, a new really good one. So.
And there's been a lot of studies about that, like with rehabilitation centers and that kind of thing. A lot of times that magic number is around that 90-day mark. Yeah. So that's why 90 days was the magic number for this specific fast, this specific program, and it's been helpful to I'm sure at this point, like hundreds and hundreds of of men across the country, maybe across the world even. It has its own app at this point, at the time that we're talking about this, and it's an amazing program that's been super transformational for all three of our lives. We just happen to have finished and embarked upon the second time we've done this fast, all three of us together within our fraternity, which is basically the group of men that goes about it. And there's been actually other fasts patterned after the Exodus 90 fast that for the ladies. We can get into that even later on as well, but
it's absolutely crazy.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because John feels kind of ways towards these, right? Or
some of the other fasts and their disciplines and stuff like that. But we won't get to
that joke. I couldn't hold it in. I'm sorry, Roland.
We had a group of shout out to our fraternity. We had a group of in total 26 guys, a group of 26 young men doing it. We also had a group of was it 8 older men that were doing it?
Like 8.
Eight, right? And then we had a group of 48 ladies doing the Magnify 90 fast, which was incredible. That they were able to get so many different ladies to be able to embark upon that fast together. So any whatever fasting you're doing, it's commendable. You know what I mean? Because
and it's super cool. I think the biggest thing is within all of this, I really look at it and I'm just like, imagine if we didn't have this. Like, imagine the community that wouldn't have been brought from this.
Yeah.
Without it. And the thing I was really remembering as we're talking about it, I'm like, I remember when we started it, and that's something I kind of want to jump into a little bit, is when we started it, it was COVID. It was COVID when we did it, and imagine if we didn't have that. If we didn't have that brotherhood, like in that moment of COVID, like
it was tough. It made it kind of tough in some senses, because obviously when you go into a time like that, we went to, a few months since 2020, it's you want to go to those distractions, and a huge part of this fast, as we kind of get more into talking about the fast, is removing those distractions from your life in order to be able to be more dependent on the Lord.
Yes.
Right? So removing those distractions, so we can even go through some of the asceticisms that it entails, so that people can kind of get a better understanding of what those are. But really a lot having to do with technology and media. So limiting your phone usage in general, like no social media, no movies, video games that are like not uplifting to the Lord. Movies, video games. What else? Just other things related to technology.
Right now.
It was just call someone if you need to, not to be on your phone texting.
Right. No unnecessary internet usage. No unnecessary purchases.
Checking stocks and all that stuff, and just you scrolling, searching for what's the cutest stuff in the world. It's super random like that, like
the things that we just
the largest squirrel, it's like things like that, like this kind of
the stuff that's just nonsense. And I think the biggest thing,
the curiosity.
Well, the curiosity.
Man, now I really want to look up the world's largest squirrel.
We will after this, because we're on an Exodus.
Maybe we'll put it on the. No, I'm just kidding.
It's gonna be like just our. Sorry,
but no snack.
That'll be the thumbnail.
That'll be I was like, what's it called?
People will have no idea why the world's largest squirrel will be next to our faces.
So there's like no snacking.
No snacking, right?
Fasting, Wednesdays, Fridays, abstaining from meat.
Yeah.
Things that are kind of similar to Lent as well.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of
it's just diving deep, and then I think what it was for me on a personal standpoint, and I know this isn't where we're heading at, but it's, I think my favorite thing about it, especially during that time of COVID, was it made that need of like, I have to call this person every single day. Like there was that sense of I had to keep community in that moment.
Because
and it was like, dude, if I remember the guy who was my anchor last year.
So let's explain what an anchor is for those that don't know.
So an anchor is, I'm just throwing this out of the blue. An anchor is basically, when you think of an anchor, you think of an anchor of a ship, and what does that do? That keeps the ship centered. There's going to be rocky waves and everything all around. I think of COVID, there was so much rockiness that was happening all around us, and things were throwing us off, not being able to attend the sacraments, not being able to just be in the same place with our brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
But amidst that rockiness, there's still that anchor holding that ship to where it needs to be. It could be pushed around, but it's still holding it there. And that's essentially what that person is. It's that person that you talk to, that you call, that you say, here's how I'm doing.
Throughout the fast,
Throughout the fast. This is how I'm doing. This is what's going on.
Yeah.
And you had a couple of questions like to talk about within it, like, hey, seriously, what's going on? And I remember my first Exodus that I did, I basically, it's not that I hated talking to my anchor, but it was like such a burden it felt at times, because I was like, man, I'm just answering the same question. I couldn't see him and this and that, but then it was like this thing of like,
it's like a long distance relationship almost.
Yeah, but it was like, it gave me that sense. And now like he's a really good brother in Christ right now, and we're constantly like, there's still a community there, and it's like, man, if I didn't have that in that moment, I wouldn't have connected with you guys, with this community. I would have gone ahead and just been off the boards, just doing ministry for self instead of for the kingdom of God.
Yeah, that's a good point, what you say, that it was boring, because I feel like it could be like that if you're not opening yourself. I mean, you can easily get a message from your anchor, be like, hey, how are you today? Oh, I'm doing great. Good. Next day, yo. How are you today? You same, chilling. But if you're not willing to open up and really say how you are,
that vulnerability.
Be vulnerable in those aspects.
And part of it too, and the beauty,
you won't get anything from it.
The things that really make friendships like truly enriching, like, you know what I mean? It's that idea of shared experience, right? And so that's the beauty. That's the reason that the Exodus Brotherhoods, because like we were talking about before, there's these different pillars of Exodus, right? Prayer, the disciplines, the asceticisms, and fraternity, and that's one of the biggest things. And so the reason that brotherhood becomes so strong is because you're going through that shared experience. It's that idea of compassion, right? What is compassion? Suffering with, right? Suffering with the other. And so that shared experience is really, I mean, that's what makes a friendship in general. Like, you share experience, like you share laughs, you share like interests, right? And in this, you're literally going through the ringer together, in a sense, right? Through this time, and you're holding each other up. And so that's the idea of an anchor, being a prayer partner, is to be able to hold the other one up while the other one might be slipping in the fast. Because obviously this is, as we've been talking about it, I'm sure you guys can understand, you guys can tell from just us speaking a little bit about it. It is kind of intense. It isn't kind of an intense experience. I'll tell you guys my personal experience, like having heard about it from before, because the year before we did it, which the year we did it was 2020, the first time. The year before we did it, I'd heard about it for the first time from my brother, that he had actually gone through and done it. And I remember being on the outside looking in, and hearing the different things that he had to do during the duration of the fast, and I was like, respect to you. I don't think I'll ever do it, because it seems like pretty radical. It seems like intense. I was like, I don't know. I don't think I need that. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't seem like something that, that I really feel like I need, in my walk with the Lord. Like, me and you, God, we're good. We're walking, we're doing our thing. So from the outside looking in, I was like, oh, that's intense. That's radical. Like, I don't think I need that. But and it really shifts your perspective on life, and we can get more into that too with each of us. But it might sound radical from the outside looking in, and you might be feeling the same way that I was, but it was truly transformational for my life and these guys as well. I know.
Yeah, it's kind of when you think of other fasts, you think of the 40-day water and bread fast, or think of Exodus. You do think
Lent.
Lent. You think like, that's kind of crazy. But then once you actually get into something like it, you're like, this is not quite enough. We got to do more. You taste that. You taste that.
Called to more. Yeah.
Exactly. You're called to more. It's like knowing what a venial or mortal sin is. You're like, now you know what it is. So it's like it's kind of that twist on mentality, and just knowing, like what you said, you're called for more in that aspect. You just got to do more. It's like it can never be enough. You can never say it's enough, because enough is the cross. Like, you can't compare to that.
Yeah. Well, and Christ talks about fasting. Like, he talks about prayer and fasting.
Well, Christ talks about it, and it's something so cool. And I love how you brought it up about the whole thing of, like, you saw what your brother had, and you're like, that's okay. I don't need this right now. And it was that whole thing.
Right.
And we were talking about it earlier. It's like, within, I think it's Book of Matthew, I can't remember right now. I don't want to look it up on my phone, but Christ talks about how, it was disciples of John basically went to him and were like, why do we fast? Why do ourselves as John's disciples, and also why do the different Jewish priests, like why do they go
I
fast?
have it right here. So it says,
why do the Pharisees fast?
This is from the English Standard Version. So then the disciples of John came to him saying, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" And Jesus said to them, "Can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast." Basically saying when Jesus has gone and ascended to the Father, that will be the time that his disciples will fast, including ourselves.
But it's something so very real, like I think, and it's something very, in that moment, you think of, I love looking at everything within it, and we talk about, oh my gosh, we need to fast, we need to go ahead and not eat as much, or we need to do this, or we need to do that.
Yeah.
And then you look at the Bible, a lot of people look at that and be like, the disciples didn't do that. Like, literally, each and every time they were hanging out with Jesus, no matter where they're at, they were eating and drinking everywhere they went. You guys watch The Chosen. Every episode, there's food involved. No matter where they're at.
So the greatest celebration.
It was a great
Jewish
celebration, always.
Jewish
tradition. The thing is that they were surrounded by Christ. They did not. There was no separation between them. And the thing is what Jesus is talking about is like, there wasn't a need in that moment of them to fast, because the whole point of fasting, and we're gonna, words. I think we dive into that maybe,
and so to go out here,
lost.
To your point, when Jesus was there, when Jesus was present, even as he says, there was no need for them to fast at that moment. However, we see Jesus fasting in the desert for 40 days, right?
Correct.
We also see when Jesus is gone and has ascended, in the book of Acts, you see the disciples fasting. It talks about them fasting a lot in the book of Acts.
But again, with them, they were not in that moment. For them, it's Jesus ascended.
Right,
They were no longer near the physical presence of Christ.
Right.
And they also had to go ahead. It's, again, the whole point of fasting is not to go ahead and make yourself better. It's to purge yourself of things that are not
to purify yourself.
To purify. We did the refiner's fire. The whole point is to go ahead and make ourselves as pure as possible to be before Christ. In that moment, you're surrounded by Christ. You're hearing his words. I wasn't around with them, but I can't imagine that they were like, you know what, that's great, but I'm going to walk on over here and do something else. I'm going to go and do that. I'm going to go do that. And they just realized I need to go ahead and do this. And Jesus, when we look at Jesus fasting in the desert as well, it wasn't Jesus was impure. Okay. But he also wanted to, he needed to prepare, and he also wanted to show us this is what it means.
Yeah.
This is being able to say no. And St. Paul talks about it, he talks about specifically about fasting. Do not deprive each other, except perhaps by mutual consent for a time, to be free for prayer, but then return to one another, so that Satan may not tempt you through your lack of self-control.
And this is from 1 Corinthians
7. Chapter 7, verse 5.
That's and it goes back to, and obviously the theme of this podcast is kind of spreading the gospel message through the lens of Paul, and going to your point about Christ in that time of preparation and showing us how to be self-disciplined, how to say no to the things that even when Satan tempts him, right? What Paul talks about here, self-control. But so even in the book of Acts, also when Paul is struck and he's blinded, for those 3 days that he's blind, he doesn't eat. He doesn't eat for those 3 days, and obviously that part of that is from the shock of what he experienced, right? Having that vision of the risen Christ, but also it was a time of preparation for the life that he was about to embark upon, turning from Saul and being renamed into Paul. Yes. So for those 3 days, he does not eat, he does not drink, and I find that kind of interesting because it's a similar. I almost find it similar to Christ in those 40 days not eating or drinking in preparation for his ministry. And in the same way, Paul does the same thing. Maybe not as intentionally, but he is preparing for the ministry he's about to embark upon for the rest of his life.
Yeah. No, and it's so cool because you look at that, and at least for I think for all of us here, our first Exodus journey together, I think we were all like Paul in that moment, where it was that I'm one way, and then all of a sudden we were struck down and immediately changed. Like we had that huge conversion, and it was crazy.
Yeah.
But we had that, I think all of it in that our second Exodus journey is more of like like a Peter. Like, okay, I'm entering into this, and I may fall here and there, but that, you know, at least I'm constantly turning back to Christ.
Yeah, I think it was more of just like we understood from the get, like not that our suffering isn't going unnoticed, and it's for something. It's preparing us for something greater. It's drawing us closer to the heart of God. I think that's what it was. It was obviously not easy at first, like going from a life of really little fasting, maybe yearly 40 days fasting.
Maybe,
and maybe
if you go through it,
if we went through it fully during Lent. But it was going from living a life like that just to really embracing. Because it was funny the way we did it is that we would fast. We would start Exodus before Lent, like a week before Lent. We would do Lent through Exodus, and then we'd keep going. So it's just like, I remember the first time we did it, was like, Lent's supposed to be over. Christ has risen.
I remember that.
And everyone's like, everyone's celebrating. We're like,
let's do it. Let's get it.
Yeah, no, and to your point, like it is interesting, like the mindset, like it's just a mindset shift. You know what I mean? Because this life is such a life of comfort. Like we seek comfort a lot of times, not a lot of times, all the time. Like that's
so
kind of our human innate desire is to seek comfort, seek further comfort.
What do you do at the end of the day?
Right, and the antithesis of that is, and it's not, you know, we've talked about this before. It's not masochistic. It's for a purpose. Like there's a purpose, and it is that purging mindset, right? Yeah. Refining, like, you know, being able to say no to things in order to refine us and bring us closer to the heart of God. Yeah. And but it's a huge mindset shift, and it can kind of give you some cognitive dissonance where you're like, why am I doing this again? Like, why am I, intentionally allowing myself to suffer?
Funny story about it. It was this past Exodus. I was getting into the shower. I think we're about to finish. You know, I think it was like towards the end of the road, day 70, 60. I'm getting in a cold shower because that's the Exodus thing.
That's one of the Exodus disciplines.
I'm just sitting there in the cold shower, and it's just like, you know, first initial shock, whatever. And then you kind of get used to it, but it's still cold, and it's still not. It's uncomfortable. Yeah. So then I'm just sitting there, and I'm thinking to myself, like, man, this is my life. Like, I can't live without doing this stuff. Like, I can't live without fasting now.
Yeah.
This is literally gonna be my life until there's no life anymore for me. Like, I'm just gonna continue to fast. And it was more like, it was like me like saying it, not wanting to say it, but I was just like, no, this is it.
And isn't that interesting? How like have you guys found yourselves like missing it sometimes?
Dude, it's so fun. No, it's actually true. It's that order. It's that sense of it's that sense of, and this is the real word that I really thought. It's a sense of what is the purpose of this thing. Mm-hmm. You know, all these things that they have, the showers, the food, the gaming, like all these things have a purpose. Right. The purpose isn't for us to, because we feel in a sense we have these things and we're like, okay, I need to use this, and I need to use it to have my hunger quenched. I need to use this to have a nice shower. I need to use this, and it's like, no, use this to get clean. Use this to feed your body in what it needs. You use these gaming things to maybe connect with others, And I was thinking about it. I just went ahead, like right before this, I took a cold shower. At first it was warm, and I was like, oh, that's too warm. I put it cold. And actually, your cold showers, bless you on your cold showers, because they're nice. I'm not gonna lie. I wish I had his cold showers. It was good. It was some good water.
Warm showers.
Bro, I put them all the way. I was like, is that it?
We're gonna get you to use
shower, bro.
For next Exodus. Oh no.
But it was coming back to that where it's like, man, like this is something I long to have.
Like the necessities of life.
Because it's like, again, that shower, it's not meant for me to just sit back, relax. It's like, I need to get in here to get clean. That's it.
Right. Well, and a lot of times, and we've talked about this. We talked about this, I think, on the anxiety episode, where we were talking about how a lot of times when we feel anxious or something, we'll go into something like we'll just go snack, or we'll go play video games, or we'll watch a movie just to kind of numb whatever we're feeling, because we don't want to feel it almost. Like, and that can go really deep, but like, but it is kind of like a saying like, hey, no, I'm gonna face this. Like I'm like for myself, for my personal testimony, you know, I'll kind of express a little bit like when I went into my the first time that we did the Exodus fast together with our group of guys. I was going through a rough time of my life where I was just really discovering a lot of wounds in my life, and it was all kind of leading up to that Exodus. I remember, and just to kind of give people an understanding of how this kind of happened, John Mark puts all of us, all the prospective guys in the group chat, including ourselves, and he's like, hey brothers, do an Exodus 90, join me. You know, he probably goes a little bit more into detail, but and we just kind of knew John Mark as Jackie's, you know, boyfriend. We know he's his minister. We're like,
dude,
okay.
I think I had been here.
He was alright.
Dude, I don't think I was even living here for like 2 months before I went ahead and I was like, no, because we started in February of that year?
Yeah.
Probably.
Something like that.
But I wasn't here that long.
No,
well,
right.
and so
Bro,
so that's what happened. So you sent us a message in the group chat. And
I remember, Ricky and I hadn't really been talking as much then.
Yeah.
I don't know for what reason, but we would talk, but it wouldn't be like a weekly basis as we are now. But I saw him in the chat. I was like, I remember telling Kyra, I was like, yeah, he's not doing it. He's too busy for this. He's not gonna do this. I was like, Ricky's in this.
Dude, no, man, you didn't.
Well,
you didn't do it.
I was out. I was not.
Yeah,
I was.
He wasn't at the meeting.
I was out. I
was like, I knew it.
I didn't think I was gonna. I mean, no, but you know what? Fair enough. You were right, though. You were right. Like that was where I was in my life, and I was very, you know, it was, and that's another thing, because I think partly, you know, us doing the fest and also partly having that lockdown experience was actually, in some senses, like to be able to kind of make ourselves not as busy, to kind of rest and kind of just spend that time with the Lord was super important. But anyways, backtracking back to when you invited us. I didn't think I was like, it was the time for me. At that time I had warmed up to it a little bit more.
I remember those
and
words.
I was like,
this isn't the time for me.
I was like maybe at some point, like I just kind of warmed up to it after my brother did it. And I was like, maybe at some point, but now it's probably not the time. And then for that month and a half before we actually did the fast, the Lord was just kind of kicking my butt, like left and right, in a good way, like in just kind of like revealing wounds that I really had to address. And revealing things that I was like, man, like I really need to go deeper in my intimacy with you. And it was like about a week before, I remember I just had like a really crazy breakthrough, and I ended up deciding to do the fast the night before.
Yeah.
And so the reason I say all this to say, you know, during that time in my life, I was discovering all these wounds. I was going through kind of like these weird kind of personal rough patches, and in my faith even too. And those first 2 weeks, I basically had anxiety attacks like every single day of the Exodus 90 fast. It was crazy. I say all that to say, and to go back to my previous point of what we were talking about, when we go to those things, when we're anxious, to kind of numb the pain, to kind of desensitize us, to distract us, you know. But it was so key that I went through that period. Even I was like, Lord, like, I don't think I can do this. Like, I'm going through these anxiety attacks every day. Like, Lord. And it came to a place where it was like, the Lord was like, I'm going to teach you what trust really looks like. I'm going to teach you what surrender truly looks like, you know? And he taught me. He taught me during that time. And I became completely and utterly dependent on the Lord, as opposed to the other things that I would go to, whether it be social media, whether it be a movie, whether it be whatever, snacking, whatever it is. Not necessarily my personal things, but like whatever. It could be any of those things for each of us. And so it became that thing of removing those distractions, because he was saying, no, I'm the one that you need to depend on. And so that was the beauty of it for me in my own life. And that's why it was super transformational, because of this fast, doing it twice now, I've never been in a place of more deeper intimacy with the Lord.
Yeah.
And it's because I was just completely focused and totally on him, you know?
That's all you had. Like I love it as you're saying this. I'm like, this is literally what St. Paul wrote, and that happened for you. Like, do not deprive each other, except perhaps by a mutual consent for a time.
Yeah.
To be free for prayer.
Right.
Like,
and it's to hone ourselves.
He gave you that time.
Iron sharpens iron, you know? And it's like that brotherhood, that fraternity.
Yeah, but
during
then
that
return
time.
to each other.
Right, exactly.
I'll never be alone, I'm with you. You're closer to my heart than I knew.